Hello everybody, it's your pal Gracious E.V.A here. This video might be familiar to you all if you've been on my channel for a while, but yes, I am in fact going to be drawing all of the Archons from Genshin Impact again. See, a little over a year ago, I started an art series where I drew all of the Genshin Impact gods in my then style. At the end of that series, I said that I would probably draw these guys again when the new Archon came out. And well, that actually did end up happening. I started redrawing these pictures back around when Sumeru was released, and it did take me a while to draw these guys, but now I can finally talk about them. This time I decided to include all of the speed paints into one video instead of 4 separate ones, mainly because I have a lot of other videos planned and I don't want to keep pushing them back for 4 whole weeks. This might end up making the video a bit long since I have more to say for each one, but if future me will remember, I will include sections in the video so that you can skip ahead to any part you want to. Don't get your hopes up, I tend to forget that a lot. But anyway, the Archons also won't be in proper order since I'm showing them in the order I drew them in. And I think with that, we can go ahead and start. Our first Archon we're drawing is Zhongli, aka Morax. He's the first one that I drew in the last series, and now he's the first that I redraw here. Fun fact, I finally actually have him now after trying to roll for him in 3 banners. So yeah, that's really cool. Do I use him? Last time I just drew everyone in stoic standing poses, which were pretty bland, but this time I'm drawing them all in some fancy action poses. I've been practicing posing a lot recently, and I decided this would be a good time to practice some more. All of their poses are inspired by their flight animations, and for Zhongli, I drew him in the pose he takes when he uses his charge attack animation. He sort of kicks his spear into the air, and I always thought that was really cool. So first I used a 3D model and posted, then used it as a reference while sketching the pose. I don't trace over my 3D models when I use them, but I do draw over them so that way I can better grasp the pose I'm drawing. I found that this has helped my anatomy quite a bit, and it's a reason why I've been really liking Clip Studio Paint and wanted it in the first place. Although there are other third-party apps and sites you can use if you don't use Clip Studio. Sketching didn't take too long, but you know what was really the bane of everything here? The line art. One, because drawing Genshin Impact characters do take a while already, especially with all the details, but what was really getting me was his anatomy. You would think I would have figured this out in the sketching, but I realized there were some errors with it, so I tried fixing them in the line art. Usually this isn't a super bad thing for me, I tend to do this, but of course it took a while, and as I kept trying to clean it up without it getting fuzzy or pixelated, it just took even more and more longer. That sentence made sense. I eventually figured it out, but that was probably the most difficult part of this piece, and of other pieces as well, but mainly this one. The color is the other thing that takes the longest since there are a lot of colors. It's quite a difference between like how I am used to coloring my own characters, since I stick to like 4 or 5. 5 is like the max. I usually do 4 for the clothes, 1 or 2 for the skin, and like 1, 2, or 3 for the hair at most. I usually create a base color of like gray and create clipping layers for each color, but with drawing Genshin characters, that's a lot of clipping layers. Once I'm finally done with those, I believe I did the background first, since that's my usual process. If you watch my first video drawing him, you'll remember that I actually used an art mashup program thing to create the background. This was because I really wasn't that good at backgrounds at the time and was having a hard time creating something, especially from my head. Should have used references, but I don't think I was finding any references that I thought were cool. But this time, it was much easier to create since I've been practicing backgrounds a whole lot more. I used the colors from the background from before, and I love using warm tone colors, so this was fun to create. I made the mountains much more simple and have them more curved towards the main focal point, rather than having them be in a straight horizontal line. Then I started shading Zhongli, and what's interesting was at the time of creating this first piece, I had just recently discovered of that shading style that I use now, and was still playing around with it. At the time of making this one though, I've been using the shading style for quite a while, so it was cool seeing that. It's not a super big difference, but there are some slight differences. Yeah, I also got to use a lot of warm shadows and bright gold highlights, which I love working with. To create the spear, I'll be completely honest and say that I just took the spear from the original drawing and relined it. It already looked good. I really didn't want to draw it again, and I was being a little lazy, but I think it looks good still, so that's my defense. To create the spear effect he makes when doing his charged attack, I duplicated the spear and colored it all flat, did that a few times, and lowered the opacity and set it to glow. I also tried creating this wisp of light thing coming from the spear, but they do kind of look like late mountains, but oh well. Finally, I used this diamond jagged brush and my line art brush size up to create some particles, and that was pretty much it. I really enjoyed coming back to this piece and seeing the improvement as well as practicing posing. The next archon I drew was actually the newest god, Buer, or Lesser Lord Kusanali, or Nahida. She's got quite a few names. I drew this around the time she was released as a playable character, and it was an interesting one to work on. This was the first time I drew her in my style, but I think she fits it quite well. I drew her in a similar pose to one of her attack animations, which are really cute. The pose was actually quite easy, so I didn't use a 3D model with this one, however. But sketching her and creating the liner for this one did take a bit, since it was the first time drawing her and I kept missing certain details. Adding in her base colors was also quite hard because of the certain parts of her dress that have this black and green gradient with sparkles. I think it's supposed to either look like sort of like video game effects or space. That's another thing I kind of like about Nahida, is that she's got kind of like a video game future tech aesthetic to her, despite being the Denjo Archon, the god of leaves and nature and flowers and stuff. But I always found that super interesting. I think because maybe the people in Sumeru are like the sages of wisdom and have all this access to technology. Even though I think Fontaine is supposed to be the location with all the technology, but okay. Her design overall isn't super that detailed other than the colors, which was quite fine with me. I am not opposed to drawing a not harder design. It was also quite interesting getting to draw a shorter character. I don't tend to draw child characters, so I had Zhongli's picture up to make sure that all her proportions were accurate. I did end up drawing her feet a bit bigger than I probably should have, but it kind of lends more towards a chibi and cartoon feel, so that's cool, I think, hopefully. For the background, I tried mimicking the one she creates when she uses her burst, but it was quite a bit harder to do, mainly because out of all of the Archons, she's the only one that had the non-natural landscape, despite being the god of nature. I also added in a black and green sky like the gradients in her dress, and I eventually added a bunch of green vines with flowers in the background and the foreground, since she is the Denjo Archon and yet does not have a natural background for me to draw. I also added in the pattern thing she creates under her feet when she's attacking, which is I think supposed to be like DDR style, like square dance designs. It's weird. Everything about her is like so like something you wouldn't expect out of the nature one. But because of this meant that the light was going to be coming from below. As you can tell so far, this is a very green color palette, which is the type of color palette I use the least often in my art. If you've looked at all my artworks on like Instagram and stuff, you'll notice a pattern of more sunset colors, pinks and purples, sometimes blues, but never, or not never, but rarely have I done any greens. So I'm not sure why about that, but I'm just usually not drawn to more green colors, and I like sunset ones better. Sunsets are superior. You can be mad at me. I don't know why you would be though. This meant that rendering Nahida was actually a bit difficult. I found using only green for shading natural skin tones is pretty hard and can easily make the skin feel a little sickly. The same can be said for the lighting as well. With the light coming from below, I had to be careful to not make this look like too eerie or anything. But coloring her eyes was fun, although I might have made them a bit too bright, as I tend to do. And for the rest of the foreground, I added the light coming from the pattern on the floor, of course, and a whole lot of petals. More petals for the petal god, I say, even though she doesn't really have anything as far as nature goes. Maybe it's kind of like, you know, she's the odd one in the group kind of, so it kind of makes sense. I also added in a few more flowers, and that was it for drawing Nahida. It was fun drawing her for the first time, and although the color palette was harder for me to work with, I think they turned out alright. Next, I drew Venti, aka Barbados. For Venti, I wanted to draw him in his charged attack animation as well, but his pose was also much easier to draw. Really, the most difficult part of his drawing was his bow, which I had never drawn before, and I tried drawing the bow that I believe is his official weapon. I think I looked it up. It says it is his, but I don't know. Which also happens to be quite detailed. Drawing Venti himself, though, wasn't too hard. I'd say it was about as standard as drawing any other Genshin character that isn't Zhongli. Although Venti also has a pretty green design. It's not as much as Nahida. It's more of a teal, which I have a easier time working with. I also now just realized that I drew both him and Nahida. I almost called her Nadia. And the reason for that is because if you've read Lost Hearts, you know what Nadia looks like. She also has a high ponytail look. It's not a side ponytail, but it is a high ponytail look. But you'll also know if you've played the quest, you'll know there's some stuff with time loop things, and if you've read Lost Hearts, you know that's pretty similar to what happens over there. And Nadia may or may not be a core part of that. So yeah, what was I saying? I know what I was saying. I was saying how both Venti and Nahida have winking eyes, and I think that was interesting. But yeah, again, one of the things that took the longest was, of course, the line art. But I didn't find it extra hard or anything except for the bow, of course. The colors were also pretty easy. I feel like he has the most simple of the Archon so far. I feel like his color palette has way less colors than the others. Not saying it doesn't have a lot, but it does have way less. The biggest thing that I was focusing on for this one was the wind effect, which I created using these circular lines. I made more circling lines around him with a round brush on add glow layers. I tried focusing on making them swirled around him like wind, which is something I very much did not do in the first one. Really only relying on the leaves, which is fine. It's more realistic, but it doesn't look as cool, you know? I also made his arrow glowing, since in his burst animation, if I remember correctly, he summons an arrow to create his black hole thing. The only thing is, I wish I didn't make it so big. For the background, I tried going with a similar look to his first one, but I realized that it does look a lot like Zhongli's, even though Mondstadt doesn't really have big mountains like that. But imagine that this is taking place in Storm Terror's lair or something. I also said place. That's the thing now. It's place now, not place. I'm not wrong. But yeah, I shaded them very similarly to Zhongli's mountains, giving them a nice textured look. He also created a lot of clouds because, wind. And for the ground, I went with a pretty simple and pretty lazy approach, if I'm to be honest, and shaded it in simply and used a lotus flower brush around his foot. In hindsight, I wish that I was more detailed with those, or at least shaded them in more. I'm pretty sure I was getting really tired and I wasn't thinking about that, and I just wanted to finish it, but oh well. I also added in some flowers and petals in the wind, but I might have gone too crazy with those, honestly. And with that, that was done. Although I do wish I did some things differently. I don't think that this piece turned out too bad. The last one is Raiden A, sometimes Raiden Shogun, aka Beelzebub. Yeah, when I drew her for the first time last year and made the video, we actually didn't really know anything about her since Inazuma had just come out, and I thought that her name was Ball, although a lot of people actually thought her name was Ball, but then it was revealed that she was in fact Beelzebub, and her sister was Baal. In fact, her sister was the first Electro Archon, and she was the second. I don't think there was any other Electro Archons before them. I didn't know this until I played the quest, so sorry that the title is incorrect. I didn't know. I didn't know. And then I found out, and I was like, oh, I'm dumb. Now, this last one took me quite a while to do, simply because I was struggling with the pose a lot. At first, I was trying to create it based off of her charged attack animation, the one where she sweeps her spear into a moon crescent, but I couldn't figure out what angle to create it in, and it wasn't really looking good, so I looked at some of her attack animations to find a different pose, and found this one, which is when she does after a basic move. She crouches down and creates this hand gesture, and I thought it was very dynamic, so I went with this one. Also, I said hand gesture like she was flipping someone off, although that'd be sick. Instead of a model, I looked only at the reference for guidance, and I was trying my best to make it look as close to it. Some details that I was struggling with was her back arm and her legs, and I couldn't really see see those in the reference. And I think it's supposed to be hidden, so I didn't draw it. I think that's okay. I think the legs turned out alright, although her front foot is a little at a weird angle, and I don't know why. And of course, the line art took forever. But that's a given. While that's playing out, fun fact is that Raiden E.V.A. was actually my first ever 5-star character, and she has been on my team ever since, as a support, because I think I built her wrong. She's supposed to be a main DPS, I think, or at least some sort of DPS, but I built her like a support, and I just used her burst animation as like extra electro damage whenever any of my other characters attack. Yeah, that's my bad. If Alhaitham, Kazuha, or Nahida's banner ever roll around again, maybe I'll play around with having one of them as my actual support. Although Alhaitham I don't think is supposed to be a support either, but knowing me, I'm probably going to build him like one, because I'm bad at building characters. It's taken me so long to build them up to a high enough level where I can actually go on to the next ascension level. I've been on the first one forever. It's just because I'm bad at building characters. I think that her design is one of the most complicated of the 4, simply because of all the patterns on her sleeve and skirt thing. The way that her other sleeve folds, her big ribbon, and her hair being more complicated because it has a fade, but also pink streaks, all kind of lead into the more complicated feeling. Although Zhongli and her, I think, just both have the most complicated designs. So yeah, usually takes a while for me to draw her. But anyway, after I finally finished her line art and base colors, I started with the lightning, I believe, and I always enjoy drawing lightning. I think I've explained how to draw lightning before, but all I do is make sharp zigzag motions with a round brush, duplicate that layer, blur it out, and use art glow and glow dodge layers. I created a bunch of lightning for this, since she is the Electro Archon. More lightning for the lightning god. Talking about her, not Thor. Or that one, her Shire from Honki Impact. I think she's also electric god, I think. This obviously affected the lightning the most with the shading, which is why I did that beforehand. And for shading Raiden, I stuck with dark purples and light purples. So very purple palette. Her eyes are pretty interesting since they have the dot of blue in the center, so I always try to add that before adding anything else so I don't forget. Drawing Genshin characters in my style is always interesting since my coloring style was supposed to be inspired by theirs, but it ended up doing its own thing, and I would call my style, other than coloring, anime inspired with some cartoon elements. As you can see for the background, I reused the tree. I said it took forever in my first video. I will be reusing it because I still like it and I don't want it to go to waste. Okay, but are we in agreement here that we're going to be reusing the tree and it's going to be fine? Okay, we're going to reuse the tree. I did reuse it. Some other elements for the background too, but changed a bit. This includes adding in clouds in the sky and some faint lightning, some mountain peaks, so that way she's not the only one without mountains. Added in more leaves into the tree, and added some leaves into the foreground and some floating panels. I now realize that the only picture that doesn't have mountains in it is Nahida's, which, again, I think it does make sense though. She was isolated for a long time. For 500 years? That's a while. I like how glowy this picture ended up being because of all the lightning. And I think Nabluwa. And finally, that was all for the current Archons. I'll inevitably see you again next year when Fontaine releases. If I am still into this game by then, who knows, I might get burned out by then. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hate when that happens. Don't you hate when that happens, when your video gets cut off by some mysterious demon things that may or may not be foreshadowing to the next video? I hate it. I should look into that, look into something to get them out of my life. But anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed this video. And if you want to see any of these, they'll be in the links in the description on my Instagram and Artful account. And you can buy my comics on both Webtoon and Tapas. Lost Hearts is finished. Oh my god, I won't be posting it anymore. It's finished now. It's done. No more. I'm done with it, finally. I actually have been done with it for a bit. I just finally was able to post all the episodes. Oh my god, that thing took way longer than it was supposed to. But if you want to read the entirety of Lost Hearts now, you may check that in the description as well. Mysteries of Distearia will still be posting on Webtoon every other Friday, and hopefully Tapas will be caught up by now to also be posted on every other Friday. And keep an eye out for another one coming soon to you and on Webtoon and Tapas. And with that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.